What is going on, everybody? It is Dylan with Astro DFS bringing you a brand new video. Today's video, I'm going over Week 10's Monday Night Showdown between the Commanders and Eagles. I go over the game on both sites. What I basically do is try to give you guys an insight on some opportunities, injuries, values, and just price comparison on both sites. Maybe there's players that you like on one side, but you can't get into a lineup. And on Fanduel, it might open up that opportunity, or DraftKings, it opens up that opportunity. So let's get into it. Jalen Hurts and A.J. Brown are the only two players above 10K this week on DraftKings. On FanDuel, Taylor Heineke is above A.J. Brown, but A.J. Brown is still up there in price at $14.5. But you get Hurts, Heineke, Brown, Sanders, McLaurin, Goddard, Devontae, Gibson. So those are your expensive players on FanDuel, on DraftKings, and in order. You get Brown, Sanders, then Heineke. McLaurin, Smith is just $200 more than Goddard. Gibson, Samuel. Eagles defense at $6,400. Last week there was $7,000. This week $600 cheaper, and rightfully so in this matchup. And then you get Brian Robinson here at $54,000. Johan Dotson at $5,000. Gainwell down at $4,600. Both kickers $44,000, and then you get a price discount of $600 on Joey Sly. Quez Watkins in between. Commanders defense all the way down at $32,000, and then we start to get into the value plays on FanDuel. Eagles defense almost at $10,000. Elliott, Samuel, Sly, so almost the same thing. You get a player in between. It's just the difference of Watkins and Curtis Samuel, two different players. Brian Robinson, you get a discount on FanDuel. Gainwell, Dotson, Pascal, all these guys. FanDuel has a lot more value, pricing-wise value, than DraftKings does, in my opinion. And I'll start the video by going over that. So value plays I find under $3,000. Guys under $3,000, sometimes we get the $200 players that pay off, and other times they don't. There's not a whole lot of value here, especially on the Philadelphia side. It's pretty much a Washington side, and that's Logan Thomas at $2,600. And I know he's not a sneaky value player or anything like that, but he is the tight end for the Commanders. Gets a majority of snaps. If anybody takes it, it's going to be John Bates. We've seen him get his snaps as well. 3 targets in the last game, last 2 games for both players, both tight ends. But Logan Thomas at $2,600. Philly is in the middle of the league of points allowed to tight ends. And I mean, we can go and look week 3 against Philly. 3 targets, 2 receptions for 5 yards, 2.5. So the difference between this and that, and this is on a main slate versus now it's a showdown, is you get that discount. So week 8 against Indy is $2,200, which would be the last showdown price. But $5,000 compared to $2,600, you get a lot more opportunity. And on FanDuel, he's down to $7,000. That's a huge value for me. John Bates, sorry, $800 on DraftKings. That's definitely another value. You go and look on FanDuel, he's down to $5,500, so he's at that almost bottomed out price on FanDuel. So definitely an opportunity there if you're playing quite a bit of lines. Diami Brown, with Dotson in, Diami Brown's probably not going to get as many snaps. He's still going to get in there, but the matchup is rough for both McLaurin, Dotson, and then Brown when he gets in the game. McLaurin and Samuel are my 2 wide receivers I target for Washington. Samuel being my hopefully favorite. Last time against the Bears, I really liked him, and he was just not included in their pass game at all. And on the Philadelphia side, you get Zach Pascal here, who is starting to get more opportunities. You see week 8 against Pittsburgh, gets the 2 receptions, 57 yards and a touchdown. Gets you 13 fantasy points. Last week against Houston in that showdown, 1 reception for 8 yards. So it's not saying, when I go over these guys, of saying like I expect them to have really good games or anything like that, but their value plays, they allow you to go and pay up for these players. Typically, though, when you see these $1 million winners, they usually have a mix of this mid to high pricing players that pay off. But every now and then you see these guys that are bottomed out in pricing put up a lot of points and win people money. So Zach Pascal's another one. The only other person down here for value is Boston Scott at 1,600 on DraftKings, being the third running back for Philadelphia. So if something happens to Gainwell or Miles Sanders tonight, Philadelphia runs the ball. They run the ball really good. Washington gives up quite a bit of points to running backs. Boston Scott at 1,600 is a value. Now we go and look at Fanduel, and FanDuel, I think if you go 8K and under, that's where you're finding your value. So Kenneth Gainwell at 8K is value. Dotson for his price, I would say is more value, but just some of the guys down here, Zach Pascal 75, Boston Scott 7, Logan Thomas 7, Quez Watkins is 6,500 on FanDuel. Although he has not put up a great amount of points. Like I said, Washington's secondary is just very bad. You look in the game against Washington, he gets 0. But for his price point and the amount of snaps that he gets, Quez Watkins is definitely a huge value piece to me on FanDuel. Diami Brown there at 5,500 as well. And I already mentioned John Bates. So now let's go over some of the top pieces here. So Jalen Hurts, you want to have Jalen Hurts in this. Just because not only is he the quarterback, so he's getting all the passing stats, but the rushing stats as well. And you look at his yardage the last 3 weeks, his last 3 games, I should mention. 9 attempts, 2 attempts, 9 attempts. Before then, getting 9+ every week. But it's the rushing yards. They're starting to use and be more efficient with Miles Sanders, Kenneth Gainwell in the run game to where they don't have to use Jalen Hurts as much. In a game like this where they should win convincingly, Miles Sanders will be included a lot. But Jalen Hurts gets a lot of the red zone rushing attempts too. He gets more rushing attempts in the red zone, whether it's design play or not, than the running backs. He's out carrying Miles Sanders in the red zone. That is just usage-wise of where that's at. So you want to have Jalen Hurts, obviously. A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith are both pieces for me. I do think Devontae Smith I like more in this matchup. A.J. Brown, just a lot of people look at his numbers and it doesn't really like explode. He's had 2 games over 20 points in fantasy, but they're just winning, like they're finding ways to win games without depending on A.J. Brown. Like they're using Dallas Goedert a lot. They're using Devontae Smith every now and then, and they're running the ball very efficiently. Dallas Goedert, I think, is probably one of the more consistent guys for at least fantasy numbers on this team. The number that stands out really to me is against Dallas, where he's 2 of 6 for 22. You look at his games where he gets 6. He usually is getting those catches, so that 2 of 6 for 22 could easily be 4 of 6 for about 40, 50 yards, and you're getting about the 10 fantasy points. So he's been really consistent. The only worry here is Washington plays tight ends very well, but to counter that point as well, Washington is down 2 linebackers. John Bostic's still going to be the main guy that covers tight ends, but having injuries there is a lot of miscommunication, a lot of missed assignments. So Dallas Goedert 7,800 is definitely a play. But Devontae Smith, A.J. Brown, I'm leaning towards Devontae Smith. Now his numbers compared to A.J. Brown, obviously you'd probably take A.J. Brown. But for his last 2 weeks, he's not been really explosive. Pittsburgh, their secondary was blown up. 5 of 8 for 23 yards. Last week against Houston, just 2 for 22. And you look at A.J. Brown in those games, 10 targets, 6 targets, 59, 156. This is a very bounce-back game for Devontae Smith, and I don't like to go and look at week 3, 8 of 12, 169 and a touchdown, and he gets you all those points and say, yeah, that's going to happen again. I do think he has a very good game, but games are never the same. Even if you have the exact same players play 2 weeks in a row, no one's hurt, nothing like that, the game is going to be different. That's just how football is played. But Devontae Smith, to me, I'd rather pay down $2,600 for Devontae Smith than pay up for A.J. Brown. And on FanDuel, you get a huge $3,500 discount between them and Dallas Goedert here at $11,500. Now, for Washington, I'm a huge Taylor Heineke fan. I hope he keeps succeeding. I was very irritated of them bringing in Carson Wentz, but I think it's one of those things to where there's not a lot of people that thought Taylor Heineke would be a franchise quarterback, and I'm not saying he is, but he's there until you find a quarterback worth investing in. You're not paying Taylor Heineke $10+ million a year to be your franchise quarterback or be your quarterback for the future or anything like that. You're paying him to keep you in games, to pass the ball, I think, in my opinion, very efficiently. He's able to run as well. But if you look at who they played and how close these games are, that's just the quarterback he is. Like, he doesn't necessarily always win you games, but he doesn't necessarily lose games either. 5 touchdowns, 3 picks in his 3 games, so he's throwing a pick every game. I get that. But he's played Green Bay, whose defense hasn't been that good, and the Colts, whose team is up. Just, it's hard to say where they are. But Minnesota, being one of the best teams in the league this year, especially taking out Buffalo last week, they lose by 3, and they honestly probably should have won that game. But that's just what Taylor Heineke is. So if Washington's staying in it, it involves Taylor Heineke playing very well. Hasn't been the greatest in primetime games, so that worries me. So I don't think I like Taylor Heineke as a play tonight. I think if you can get to him price-wise, and there's players that you like that don't include A.J. Brown, Miles Sanders, because if you're playing Jalen Hurts and you're not playing these two, you're probably going to play Taylor Heineke. But at 9,000, and especially on Fanduel 15,000, he really needs to pay off against a secondary who Maddox is out, but you're playing against one of the best cornerback duos in Bradbury and Darius Slay. Like, they are just very, very good and very scary to go against. So now we go with the Washington running backs. J.D. McKissick is out, which means it's Gibson and Brian Robinson again last week. The volume for what they got was pretty similar. I like Antonio Gibson in this matchup, though, just because of the targets that he receives. I mean, it's been pretty consistent all year. If they're winning, they're going to run the ball. So he's going to get rushing attempts. He's going to split with Brian Robinson. In the pass game, it seems like he is the more designed running back to get those targets. So at 6,800 compared to Brian Robinson 54, I'd pay up for Gibson easily. On FanDuel, you go and look at their prices. Antonio Gibson 10,000, Brian Robinson 8,500. So 1,500 if you like Brian Robinson more. But I prefer Antonio Gibson in this matchup. And then Curtis Samuel compared to Terry McLaurin on DraftKings, you're getting in 1,600 discount. I just like Curtis Samuel. The matchup he's got against the backup corner for Philadelphia. With Maddox being out, he's usually their slot. Curtis Samuel lines up in the slot the majority of his snaps, so he is not going to play 100% of the snaps in the slot, but he's going to play the majority. Obviously, his targets have been pretty consistent. His yardage has been there. He just gets a touchdown to help him out. But in a matchup like this, if Philly ends up doing what Philly has done sometimes and gets that early lead, and the other team has to catch up, like Curtis Samuel at 6,600. And on FanDuel, you're paying $12,000 for McLaurin and $9,000, so you get a $3,000 discount on Curtis Samuel compared to McLaurin. Dallas Goedert, I mentioned, has been pretty consistent. Washington good against tight ends. I think they're top 5 defense against tight ends statistically. But with the injuries, I do like Dallas Goedert a lot here if you can get to him. I think he's well worth it. The Eagles defense, 6,400 compared to 7,000 last week. And you look at week 3, like I said, no games are ever going to be the same. But I believe they get that. They don't get the touch on that week. But defense allows, they get credited with only 6 points. But they allow 8. They get 9 sacks in that game. And that fumble recovery, not a lot of yardage, 18 fantasy points. This is a game where they could very well destroy Washington. But I think Washington keeps it in. So if you feel confident enough of paying up for a defense that fantasy point wise is 4 is the floor right now for him, I think it's well worth paying for. So other than that, the kickers, if you're going to kicker, I go Joey Sly tonight. Only because if you look at Washington and how close their games are, he's usually getting field goal attempts. I mean, since week 5 or week 4, you can even say he gets 1 field goal attempt. He's had 2 weeks against Green Bay, Chicago, where he gets 4 and 3, ends up missing field goals, so doesn't pay off as well. But you go and look at Jake Elliott, and the most he's gotten all year is 2. That's it. 2 field goal makes is all he's gotten. The most attempts he's gotten is 2. So I lean towards Joey Sly in this contest as well, and you get a $600 discount. Commanders defense, I'm staying away. Chase Young, they're hoping to get back their next game, but he's not playing tonight, so that is unfortunate. And now I'll just go over putting in a line based off of what I like. So I'm going to do a line with Jalen Hurts as my captain. I think he's the highest scoring player tonight. Logan Thomas, 2,600 for my value play. Like Curtis Samuel, like I mentioned, so I'm going to plug him in there. Let's plug the Eagles defense as well, like Devontae Smith, and then we can also get Dallas Goedert. So what I leave out in this lineup is Taylor Heineke. I leave out A.J. Brown and no Philly running back. So this is just an example. You can go and try to find a way to plug these players in. But just for a quick line, that's what I have. You get 3 Philly offensive players, 2 Washington offensive players, and then Philly's defense. So on Fanduel, I'm going to do the same thing. I don't have to do that price adjustment on Fanduel. I like Jalen Hurts. We'll go down. Really like Logan Thomas here in that. Yet again, like Curtis Samuel, yet again. We'll put Devontae and we get 15.5, and we can afford to pay up for A.J. Brown on FanDuel. So that's just something you can go over. Obviously, we could swap out, Devontae Smith and put Dallas Goedert. We could put Terry McLaurin. Can't pay up for Miles Sanders with this lineup. But that's just an example. So hope you guys did enjoy the video. If you guys want to join us, the Discord link will be down in the description below. If you guys also did enjoy it, please leave a like and subscribe, and I will see you guys in the next one.